Hey, welcome back. This Ben was Student Late. Here's this second in the series. We did the climbing bear. Here's the Woodsman and the bear. And this is just a simple little toy. It has different ways to go about it. And purportedly the design comes from Russia. So to build it, you're going to need a piece of basswood. This is for those of you with basswood envy. I'm getting ready to cut out some chunks off of this piece of basswood. So if you have basswood envy, there you go. So again, this is what we're building. It's got a bear on one side, it's got a woodsman on the other. You can change the bear out for a rabbit, two woodsmen, a lady and a rabbit, whatever you want to do. So here I took one I did probably 20 years ago off, and this one 20 years ago. These were done totally with hand tools with a knife and a chisel and a veiner. And then as you can see, that was stock wood that I got. Probably came from Germany somewhere. So it had a dowel and then the two slider pieces. And it's fairly simple. And I'll show you how to put that together. So I got two chunks of basswood. We sawed off there. One's smaller, designed, and then one a little bit bigger. This one was a piece of scrap I grabbed. It was too small. This one was just right. So as usual, I'm going to build a pattern. These guys are held in with basic nails. And you can see I used a lot of stock pieces many years ago. When you have dimensional lumber that you purchase, a lot of times there's some steps that you don't need to go through. If you're carving completely from freehand without dimensional lumber. So you can see the bear and the man kind of have the same design. And you can turn that guy into a rabbit, a raccoon, whatever your imagination, a little old lady, little Red Robin Hood, a wolf. You get where I'm going with this. So the simplicity in this guy is to make minimal cuts. Like I said, I think this came from, the original design came from Russia. I've mentioned before Erzgebirge in Germany, where they do little figurines, and they're famous for those. They do some really neat stuff with ring animals, ring turning. If you get a chance, I don't know if you can look that up or not, but basically what they'll do is they'll take a wet basswood log, chuck it in a big chuck, probably 12-inch, 15-inch, and then they'll cut this ring, and they'll cut 1/2 of the animal silhouette or person silhouette on the outer ring, and then they'll cut that off. And when they do the front facing portion of it, they put a piece on there that they can stick back on the log. So they'll cut that off, turn it around, and I'm probably confusing the heck out of everybody. And then they'll stick that ring back on there and turn the back side of it. Then when they go and cut, when they break that ring around, the silhouette of the person is on the outer portion of the ring. So then they go through, and just like the growth spurts of the tree, it wants to cut in a triangle. You cut it like a pie on the outer rings, and you end up with all of these small little animals. And that's the way they would duplicate and turn maybe 25, 50, 100 animals. And well, they would do these guys the same way in those rings. And then you didn't have to cut each individual piece out with a skill saw or a jigsaw or something along those lines. So pretty simple carving. And they're going to do minimal cuts. So if you're trying to make 50 of these, and you're trying to get 20 of them done a day or a night, because most of these guys were farmers full time, or raising their livestock and that sort of thing during the day, and working then at night when it got to where they couldn't work outside anymore because the light was no longer there. They'd go inside, have dinner, work by the fire. And if they had an hour or two before bedtime, they would sit there in the house, because we didn't have TV, they didn't have phones, they didn't have any of that stuff we got today to keep you distracted before you go to bed. So they would make a little extra money and carve these pieces out. Well, mostly that was done in the winter, as you can imagine why, because it got dark at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. In the summertime, they were out working the fields until 8 or 9, 10 o'clock at night. But then they'd take these to town, or take them to a bigger town when they took their stuff to market and sell them to the kids. And they are kind of fascinating. They're like the fidget tools. They just give you something to play with. If you build this something like this and set it beside your chair, or a chair in the house, or a coffee table, and leave it sitting there, watch, people will come in, they'll pick it up, they'll play with it for 5, 10, 15 minutes on end. So the first one I'm going to do with a knife, and the second one I will do with the power tools, just to show you kind of the difference. Now I got to admit, you can see on the guy in the background there on his hand, he's got 4 fingers there, and they're done with a veiner. There's the bottom of his coat is delineated with a veiner, and then there's a little part of a shoe on the bottom that's not carved, it's just delineated again with the veiner. I'm not a big fan of the veiner, so you'll see me pick up a ceramic stone, and cut those in. You could go crazy on this guy and carve him fully like a character carver would, because this is more in the character carving realm. But the intent here was just when they built these, was just to get the bare minimum suggestion of what it was. And it's obvious, you can see this is a Woodsman. You could imagine you could change the stump out for a basket, and you could have a couple fishermen throwing lobsters in the basket, one throwing a lobster, one throwing a fish. Use your imagination. You could just keep going with these over and over again. And I made some of these. I made a couple of these to take down to the gallery in Wisconsin, or in Madison, so that somebody can spend their hard-earned money on a kid if they don't want to spend high dollars on artwork. So we're doing minimal carving just to make a suggestion, rounding it off. This is not the cleanest of basswood, and if I weren't doing a demonstration piece here for you, showing you how it goes, I'd probably pick a little cleaner piece of basswood. I might even go so far, you could paint these guys. But then again, you start getting into the work, so you'd ask yourself, what can I sell this for? If you carve it correctly, probably $10-12. If you start painting it and doing all this stuff, then you got to get up in a little bit more in the higher dollar range. Otherwise, it's not worth your time, unless you've got 30 little old ladies sitting around, everybody doing a production line and doing these pieces. So here we go. It's as I was talking about in the veiner. This would have been done with the veiner. I could have picked a veiner up. I've got a real nice veiner in the Brookstone set, but it's just quicker for me to put these lines in with this, and it's just kind of doing a double duty here. It's burning and cutting at the same time. So we're just delineating his coat. You could go crazy and carve this realistically, or put a lot more detail in these simplistic guys. You can take them and fully blow them out into a character. Yada yada. So here's the bear. We switched over to power carving. As usual, I run a center line. If you're new to carving, always run a center line. I've been carving for years, and the center line is where their money's at. So we want this guy to be symmetrical. The left and the right side of him, we want them to be the same. Since he is 3D in effect, if you're doing a relief carving, you're really only dealing with one side, but that helps to figure out where the center line would be on that also. Because what you're going to have in a relief carving is half of him or a third of the character or piece sticking out proud from a flat piece of wood. So you would have to imagine how far back the center line on that guy was, and work from there. This is kind of a no-brainer. There's a little bit of technical in it if you're trying to figure out what the mechanics of it are, and the best way I can explain to do that, I'll show you at the end. But obviously, if you don't have one of these to tear apart and use as a pattern, once you get one laid out and you get the mechanics and the angles going, where they're at, then you just continue to duplicate your holes. So it's a simple matter of drilling the holes in the right place and then changing, and then you go on from there. You don't have to figure out what the angle is of where this hammer is going to strike, or how far the lever is going to take this guy down on yada yada. So there's a bear. I'm still down in Iowa this week. I'm heading home tonight, and I hope to get this video put up today, and then we'll see what happens next week. I've got a whole bunch of stuff. We're into the fall. You've got to start putting stuff away for the fall. I did order a drone. My son was going to bring a drone up, and each time he did that, last time he came up, he said the drone's not working. So I went ahead and ordered a drone. It's about time to change the intro on Studio on the Lake to fall, where the leaves are just starting to turn. Up here, I noticed this morning for the first time that the local news was talking about the leaf forecast. Those of you that are familiar with it from New England and stuff, they call them leaf peepers. Those are the people that drive up to New England and look at the foliage as it changes. We get some really nice foliage changing up in Wisconsin also, and you'll get beautiful colors, and then a bright orange tree in there. So fall is starting to come upon us. The kids are back in school, and life is going to start to slow down. I need to get stuff put away around the lakefront and out at the woodlot, because with winter coming, if you miss it up here in northern Wisconsin, just leave something laying on the ground, you won't see it again until it thaws in late April, early May. And then all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, that's where that rake went. That's where it's been, under 5 feet of snow all winter long. So the original bear fur on this guy on the right, the one behind there, was done with a veiner. And you can see that, but I can get the same thing. Minimally, I'm not trying to put a whole lot of hair on this guy, just little indications of where the hair would have been. It wouldn't hurt to figure out, put pencil lines on here as to where the flow would go. I mean, how it's going to go up, down into his hands to make him look a little more realistic. This is that ceramic cut stone that I use for what I call stoning. I don't know if it's a term I kind of made up. And it was made up to do birds and bird feathers. I didn't figure it out. I think it probably came from a gentleman named Jim Sprankle, who was a baseball player in the 60s and early 70s, and then he became a wildfowl carver. And he's one of the people that kind of started all of this, the modern decoy carving. He had a duck pen in his backyard in Florida, and he actually studied the ducks and tried to do them, and he also did the painting techniques. His carving was okay for the time. It's not anywhere near what the quality of some of these decoy carvings are carved as. When you get in there, and people like Floyd Schultz and the various different folks that I look at and watch or have watched over the years, their stuff is realistic, and you'd be from 10 feet away or 5 feet away, if you weren't paying attention, it looks like a real bird sitting there. So here's all the fur lines in there. It's the exact same technique we use when we're doing the spirit beards, gnome beards. If I was going to put any kind of feather or fur on a bear, raccoon, fox, something with hair on it, rabbit, squirrel, I would do that. So we got it all out, and you can see that two things were done on that bear. One was a kind of an angled gouge, and then I came back in the old days with a veiner, and I didn't put that on the new one. So here we're measuring where their feet are going to go. So I left the cutout in the middle, and you want to make this fairly loose because you want the piece to flop around a little bit. It gives it more movement. You don't want it to be a tight mechanical piece. So I'll take this over to the bandsaw and cut out between the feet, and those are the parts that go over the two slider rails. There's a slider rail. I'm just cutting it out of a dimensional piece of weathered, I don't know, heck, 3/4 by 10 by 12 or whatever. It's a big wide pine board. How's that? So there's where the slider would go, and since I do have a pattern, I know where I want to put the holes. There's no sense in figuring the mechanics out on something that's already been done, right? The holes that go through the two sliders, the upper and the lower, will be loose fitting around the nail. So you can just go ahead and set those up and pre-drill those. And then one side of a foot will be drilled and the other side will not. That little piece in the middle flops around, and I'll show you that later, that dowel in the center. It only has one nail on the upper rail, and it's loosely done in there so that it can flop back and forth. So rather than grab a 1.5 inch dowel, I had some basswood around, so I turned that, cut that notch in the bottom of it where it's going to sit over the slider rails, and then did it by hand. Here's a bonus. You don't get to see this whole bird done. This is a wren, a baby wren with his beak open. I might show you snippets of this in other videos as I've taken to do it lately, those of you that are subscribers, and you'll see some of the little things. So here's more birds going down to another hummingbird. I've been doing lots of little birds to get them down to the gallery, because as soon as they go in the door, they sell, and that's something that helps buy new parts and pieces. But here's a hummingbird, short in the middle. You got the baby wren on the backside there, and I think I'll throw a sparrow in here in a minute. I don't remember when I edited this, but I'm pretty sure there's a sparrow coming up. And then we'll get back and finish off that Woodsman and the bear toy. Yep, there's the sparrow, just as I suspected. Nothing spectacular about him per se. Oh, there he is again. And he'll one side done. I need to do the other side, and then he will get mounted on a piece of driftwood or a branch with a wire, and he'll go down. So you can see I've already put the guy on the right on there. I just used the markings. The nails are the front of that guy's leg on the right behind there is drilled. The back leg is not. So I just barely have to tap the nail in, and you can see the front of the bear, the slider are drilled, and I'll put that down there on the stump, and I couldn't find my hammer, so I used that wrench. And then I'll position it to make sure that he's where I want him to be on the lever, sliding back and forth. And then I'll cut the two front pieces here so that they actually slide back and forth on the nail, but I didn't cut into the back of the foot or the left foot there, because that's what's going to hold the nail, and put these pieces all together. So there goes the nail, loose fit in the front, loose fit through the center slider, but not a loose, but then tapped into the back foot, and that allows everything to move. Simple, easy, the stuff you would have had around if you were a farmer or a rancher. And there it is, put together without the hammers. You can change the hammers to anything you want. Obviously, whatever your imagination is. I'm not going to bore you by showing you how to build two little small hammers. One's a shaft, and then something that looks like a hammer stuck on the end. I did check to make sure that they were placed when they were placed in the arms, and the holes were drilled, that they actually made contact at the lowest point, the point where they slide forward into the stump. I just made sure that they contact that stump, and then they were put on with 3-part epoxy, which makes it simple. And there you go, bear, voila, bear and Woodsman. So this is a kid's toy. Originally were made in Russia, and Erzgebirge now has them down in Germany, and you can get them at a lot of something similar to this at a lot of the novelty places. they're fun pieces. There actually are quite a no pun intended, a lot of moving pieces to these, so and it's enjoyable to do these. So, hey, thanks a lot. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake. Like, comment, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.